What's up, headbangers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify. Also Instagram at talklouder_podcast. And of course, our website, talklouderpodcast.com. I'm Metal Dave, along with my co-host, Jason McMaster. And today's guest is a San Antonio native, a longtime San Antonio heavy metal scenester, archivist, historian. His name is Juan Herrera. He's been around forever. He's been at all the shows going back to who knows how long. So much so that about a year, maybe 2 years ago, he put out a book called As Viewed from the Pit. And it's essentially a full-color, glossy, I guess you could describe it as a coffee table style photo book that sort of compiles a lot of photos, flyers, little nuggets of information about the San Antonio, South Texas heavy metal scene from the mid-'80s. And it's a must-have for anybody who remembers or is interested in learning about the South Texas heavy metal scene. Jason, of course, is a part of that book as the frontman from Watchtower. And Jason, you got any words on this book before we
I have
bring
too
them
many
on?
words.
Yeah, it's really well done.
I'm just thumbing through this, and the photos are. I mean, obviously, I'm emotionally connected to this book.
Yeah.
The, you know, this is my family. There are friends and family. This is my blood and my family, and this is a period of time where I was cutting my teeth as a musician. I was meeting lifelong friends. I was learning how to write music. I was learning how to sing. I was learning everything about myself and things I could do and things I couldn't do. And I was making good decisions along with bad decisions, and they're all in this book, As Viewed from the Pit, which is we're going to talk to him about. We're going to talk to Juan about him going back and forth with other people's opinions of the title of the book, As Viewed from the Pit. I think that the title is great because it gives you literal perspective through Juan's eyes as just a fan, as someone who's there soaking it all up, going, "Holy shit!"
I like the title because it's sort of, intentionally or not, it sort of caters to the fan, because if you're in the pit, then you're viewing what's on stage. And that's kind of what the photos capture, is the bands on stage. And it speaks to the fandom, if you will, that made this scene so rabid. And he only put out 125 copies of this book initially, but he's going to tell us if there's, I think we might get an exclusive today.
Yeah.
So you'll want to stay tuned for that and see if there's any more.
There's at least two new items on the docket.
Yes.
In today's People's Court. So
yeah.
So stay tuned for that in this really awesome episode about this great book. Now I want to mention there are photos in here of the bands and band members mingling together from people from different bands.
Yeah.
Off stage as well. It's not just concert footage, photographs from back in the day. It's more. It's from all sides, which again fits the title. There's a lot of people in this book that are no longer with us, which is another reason that this needs to happen, that things like this really need to happen. I feel like Juan is a great sort of conduit and champion to want to go through hell to make something like this happen, just so it can sit on the table and people can walk in who don't know and go, what is this? This looks pretty weird. What is this? And they open it and they're just like, man, who are these people? And if they love rock and roll, they're going to tell by what's going on in the pages here that there was something before them that they should know about.
Yeah. And if you're going to do something like this and you're going to get buy-in from the people you need to help you with this, you have to have credibility. And Juan's got credibility in spades, so it couldn't have come from a better guy. And I think the outcome speaks for itself. It's a great book.
I remember Juan from way back then, but very quiet. That Juan, as opposed to his buddy Sean. Sean Nations was the loud guy, and Juan was the guy sort of standing next to him, like, you know,
taking it all in.
Yeah, that's right. He was kind of the...
You got to watch the quiet ones.
Yeah, the quiet one wasn't like knocking over beer cans. He was the one going, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One day he won't do that.
And besides the book, you bring up Sean Nations. Juan is best friends with Sean Nations, and for those listening who don't know, Sean Nations is a heavy metal singer out of San Antonio. He's been part of the San Antonio metal scene forever and still is.
He's pretty much staple.
Yeah. And the two of them used to actually go down to the local radio station, 99.5 KISS, and hang out with local legendary DJ Joe the Godfather Anthony. So we're going to pick his brain a little bit about those experiences as well.
So while we've been doing this intro, Jared has been floating a pictograph, if you will, a slideshow that Juan has sent to us, and you have probably already seen photos of the book's cover, as well as some photos from the book, as well as some that I don't think are even in the book either, that I felt like I just ran through them real quick with my own eyes just before we taped this episode, and there's some things in there that I haven't seen. Some of them were taken after the book's release. Some of them are just kind of candid, funny little moments, but there's a lot of that in the book too. So just want to make sure those of you who are listening can also to know exactly what it is that we're talking about in today's episode. You can watch the YouTube episode of this podcast. Did you have anything else you want to roll, or you want to get right into?
Nah, I'm ready to roll. Let's talk to Juan.
So Juan, you're from San Antonio. Tell us a little bit about just growing up in San Antonio as it pertains to something that might our listeners might hear on a podcast about hard rock and heavy metal.
Well, she said I grew up here, was born here, raised here. Grew up in the heavy metal capital of the world, as it were.
There it comes. There it is.
So that's, I mean, what more is there to say about San Antonio? It was interesting. We had a very diverse city and rich music culture, not just metal, but rich music culture. And, but everything from metal to jazz to conjunto to a little bit of everything. So, that's, it was interesting growing up and seeing all these different things. And then, growing up, going to shows, my first show was a Van Halen show at the Convention Center Arena before that went by the wayside. And
tour.
That was on Women and Children First.
Nice. Ooh, good one.
Good
Do you remember the opening act?
I don't. I wish I could.
I think Jared was at that show.
But It was that was my first, big show, and then that just whetted the appetite and went from there. And then I went from the larger shows, still going to larger shows, to going to the local shows and just diving headfirst into that and just loving that.
Do you remember the first local show?
I remember the first one that made an impact on me. We had gone to shows here and there, but the first one was that Unholy Book show at the Cameo.
Whoa.
So it was Watchtower, Death Tripper, Watchtower, Militia,
Morbid Termination.
And Morbid Termination, yep.
Yeah.
So that was That was the first, the one that really, made an impact.
What do you remember? What do you remember about that show?
I remember just going to a show that was packed. It was sold out.
You like how I'm trying to like steer away from the fact that I was kind of the master of ceremonies that night. Trying to like steer away. Like, what are you talking about? Tell us about the show. Like I wasn't there. Yeah. From your perspective.
We want his impression of the, because he said it was the first show with the most the personal impact. So.
It was because it was the first heavy show. It was the first real heavy show as far as locals. We'd seen rock and roll bands, but nothing like this, and certainly nothing like Watchtower. I mean,
or Morbid Termination, or fucking Death Tripper. And this,
that's true. I mean,
and this would have been in 1980.
Had their own
1985.
Yeah.
How old were you in 1985?
85. I was 16.
Holy moly!
Wow.
So.
Man, your parents are cool, unless you snuck out.
Well, that's a long story. That's a long story too. See, by this point, I was already most of my life was spent over at Sean Nation's house. So at that point, his mom was raising me. So, but yeah, it was sold out, and that it was just incredible to me that a show with bands this heavy would sell out, and it was just a good time. I'd never been to a show prior to that where there was a lot of moshing. I just had never been to one before, and just to see that, and people beating the crap out of each other and then scooping each other up when they fell, that was just amazing to me. That whole scene, and then from that point on, that was my dedication, was that.
Yeah. My
beautiful.
One of my lifelong, very, very, very best friends, as you may know, is Al Kelly, who was the bass player in Morbid Termination. And I remember he always says that some of those early shows were some of his biggest shows too, of course, because at that time he's a teenager, and he's sharing stages with Watchtower, Juggernaut, playing the Cameo Theater or whatnot. And for a kid growing up in San Antonio, like you said, a metal city, metal capital of the world, if you're in a metal band, that's where you want to be, So that was his sort of introduction, and you were in the audience that night. That's awesome. Yep. So
good times.
Women and Children First, that must have been an amazing tour, because I never saw Van Halen with Roth until the reunion stuff. So what do you remember about that show? How old were you at that time, and what do you remember about that first arena concert experience?
I was 12, maybe 11, 12. I had been bugging my parents. I want to go to a concert, and the answer, obviously at that age was like, no, there's just no way, they do drugs there. We had some friends of the family. My parents hung out with a relatively large group, football crowd, so they got together every Sunday. So I grew up with their children. And finally, there was a brother and sister who were a few years older than me that finally convinced their parents to convince my parents to let me go. So they're the ones that took me. I didn't go with my parents. I went with them. Yeah.
You're the tag along. Yeah.
So it was eye-opening in many, many ways.
Yeah.
But it was, of course, it was my first show. So just to see the spectacle, especially, with David Lee Roth and, his antics, and it was huge. I mean, to the point where I went to, the next tour was Diver Down, and went to Diver Down, and so saw them on a few occasions. But that was my first show. That was my first concert.
So you mentioned Sean Nations, who is a friend of all of ours. Sean, for people listening or watching, Sean Nations is a metal singer out of San Antonio, and he fronted a band called Alienation that had quite a bit of traction back in, I guess, the late 80s, early 90s.
Early 90s, yeah.
Yeah. So at what point and you and Sean basically became running buddies. I mean, you guys basically are inseparable. So at what point at what age and where did you meet him? And what was your first, musical experience together that sort of bonded you and kept you together to this day?
We have actually known each other for going on 46 years.
Wow.
So we met when we were young, and we went to the same school. He lived about 2 blocks from me, where we grew up. So that's, we met at school, and pretty much inseparable from that point on. We had another friend so there was 3 of us, that until that other individual joined the Army, we were always together. The Unholy Book show that I mentioned earlier was our first show that we had gone to like that. Sean went to a lot more shows than I did. His mom was a lot more understanding of that. So she would take them. She took them to go see Judas Priest and, a bunch of other shows.
The rocker mom. The rocker mom.
Yeah, definitely. Well, she owned bars at the time. She was
okay.
Yeah, it was a different world.
Okay.
She owned an open medieval nights, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So go ahead and continue. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. So that's, since that age, we've always been together. It was a short time when he was living in England, and came back, and I think he was gone for 2 years, and he came back, and it was like we hadn't even been separated at all. So,
right.
So yeah, he's been my running buddy for, almost half a century.
Let's talk about Joe Anthony. It's the elephant in the room when you talk about San Antonio and it being the heavy metal capital of the world, and 99.5 Kiss and all of the boundaries that sort of broke. Maybe that's not a good analogy, but you know what I mean. Bringing a community of some sort together via just new releases from these bands globally, in the biggest little city, the littlest biggest city in the world, San Antonio, kind of a thing, where this radio station, and in one, if not the only, Joe Anthony literally broke bands in Texas by playing their songs on the radio to just kind of pump up Joe Anthony. He was kind of a living legend, even in his time, and even to this day, we're still talking about him. He's been gone for many years. What are the rumors true that you and Sean would end up down at the station hanging out sometimes? Tell us a little bit about that.
We did.
Check it out, just like a fly on the wall for even people like Southsiders in San Antonio would be like, what? Y'all used to go hang out? Joe Anthony in concert? You guys were there? Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
And for people listening that don't know, I just want to add a little more context. Joe Anthony was a huge, huge, huge legendary DJ based out of San Antonio. And if you ask the members of Rush, Triumph, Scorpions, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, they will all say that Joe Anthony had a hand in
UFO,
breaking them
Saxon,
in North America. Yeah, the list goes on and on and
Riot,
on. So he's a massively legendary, highly influential DJ. So take it from there, Juan. You're busting into his studio while he's on air. Is that right?
Yeah. It's, so Sean's mom knew Joe Anthony back from high school. So that's how that happened.
Got a connection. Okay.
And Joe owned a restaurant. So when bands would come in town, and that's of course where they would go eat while they were in town. So on occasion we would go have dinner with all these bands coming through, and Triumph, and it was. So that's how we grew up. Now, as we got a little bit older, started driving, we would go down to the station and hang out, especially if he had guests. There was Rob Halford was in town promoting that live concert movie they had done. So Joe, had invited us down, so we went down, hung out the entire night in the studio, just me, Sean, Joe Anthony, and Rob Halford, just hanging out. But that happened on a couple of occasions, where we would just hang out with them. I know people that have always asked me, especially with a couple of other endeavors that I've done, have asked me, do you have pictures? Or I'm like, no, because that would have been weird. It's not like today's world where we're taking selfies of everything. It was so normal for us that why would we have taken a picture?
Yeah.
It was the norm. So
Yeah.
we met a lot of people through Joe, and he was just, his attitude towards music was just infectious. He loved everything, and the ones that he really liked, he did everything in his power to ensure that other people got to listen to them as well.
Yeah.
So it's I see from a different perspective than a lot of people do, because that was normal. That was normal for us.
It's insightful. It's the story of just you even telling, do you have any pictures? And your comment and the way you're expressing how like that wouldn't be right because we're just people and that's like not the way people really think now. So it's really cool to just hear you as you were very young back then.
Yeah.
What year would you say some of these, Dinner with Triumph and hanging out on air with Rob Halford on Joe's show? What
we were teenagers. We had driven down to the station. So I figure at that point I was probably 17, 16. Yeah. We had to, Rob arranged it so that, because the screening for that movie was at Sneakers, which was of course, the big rock club in San Antonio at the time. So he had to arrange it so we could actually get in because it was a bar. So nice. Yeah, we were 16, maybe 17, if even that at that time.
That's the old Sneakers.
Yeah, the old Sneakers. Yeah.
What concert movie are you speaking of?
It was there was a live Judas Priest concert movie. I think it was just called Priest Live, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's the video accompaniment to the live album that Priest they put out. Yeah, it's the gold cover with
the copper cover. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Just to be certain, I didn't know that was it in theaters.
I think it was, but I think the screening here in San Antonio, and of course they chose San Antonio for the initial screening of it because of Joe Anthony.
Yeah, of course, but probably certain markets. I'm sorry, I'm ignorant to the fact that was actually something that Priest and their management and their label were actually promoting in 1980.
Yeah, it was definitely something new and unusual. I mean, you had concert footage from and movies Woodstock, for example, but nothing of the heavier nature. I just didn't.
Yeah,
that's not something that was normal at the time.
Yeah,
a couple of my friends won tickets to that screening, and they were huge Judas Priest fans, especially the one guy, Jim O'Flynn. The other guy was named Shane Garwood, and to this day, Jim O'Flynn is a Priest fanatic, and I mean that in all caps. And I knew they won tickets, and they were going to get to go to Sneakers to see this screening, and I assumed that there was a chance they would meet Rob Halford, so I sent them with my vinyl copy of Unleashed in the East, and Rob signed it for me, and it's hanging over here in this room.
That is awesome.
Related to Juan's story, you have like 6 degrees of separation. You actually, wow, okay.
It's hanging right up there between Saxon's Power and the Glory and Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast, and I could tell Rob signed it upside down, so you can envision the cover of Unleashed in the East, where he's standing there with the mic stand. And I imagine he was just surrounded by people because it's a bar. And one of my buddies handed him the record, and he probably just took it upside down and signed his name.
Signed it.
But it's good enough for me. It's
good enough.
Oh, yeah.
It's Rob Halford's autograph, and it's hanging up. Yeah. Years later, I got Ian Hill to sign it as well. So
fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Upside down. Upside down.
No, Ian had the benefit. Ian had the benefit of me handing it to him in a much smaller audience.
Right.
So Juan, you talk about your friendship with Sean is obviously enduring and everlasting and has been going on for 4+ decades. Now, we know Sean from.
I was going to say we know Sean and we love Sean, and Sean's like a staple just as much as you are. I've always been impressed with you, and you as well, but you and Sean, inseparable again. We're always had the right energy. You were always at the right. I felt like a good place for a good time, right? In the right
Yeah, well,
place,
absolutely.
in the right place at the right time, and it always had to do with rock and roll. If I showed up and you guys were there, I knew I was in the right place. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I would look at it from the opposite point of view. Well, shit, Jason's here, so it's got to be the right place to be.
well,
Yeah.
thank you for that, but I felt the feeling is mutual. I feel like that was a good sign. Oh, good, thank God, Sean and Juan.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, but so what I was getting at is,
thought it was going to be a puppet show. Now I know it's going to be for real.
so we know I got to meet Sean as being a singer and a performer, and from there we became friends. And he ran in the same circle of friends as me and my buddies and all that stuff. So my question is, did you ever have any musical aspirations? Did you ever play any bands? Do you play any instruments? Are you a musician at all in any way?
In fact, the first band that I was in, it was Sean was the singer in the first band that I was in.
Okay.
It was funny. I'm still working on my office here. So I've got just boxes and boxes of just stuff that was put away over the years. So last week and a half ago, I came across some of the old tapes that we had recorded. And oh yeah, it was,
Yeah.
laughter, tears, a little bit of everything, just listening to that stuff.
So what was the band called, and what instrument did you play?
So the band's name was Nation's Reign. God, he's gonna kill me for talking about this. And I play guitar.
Okay.
So, and it was short lived. He moved on, and I started doing other things. Still dabble with it every once in a while.
Well,
a couple weeks ago, I got
love rock and roll, so it's always going to be there. You love rock and roll, so.
And a few weeks ago, Sean approached me about working with one of his bands, Killswitch Incorporated. So I am now actually an official member of Killswitch Incorporated. So
you heard it here first on the Talk Louder podcast.
Wow.
So yeah, I've got a lot of stuff going on, but that was the one band that the opportunity ever came up that I would definitely jump at it. So
sweet.
So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, Killswitch Incorporated has for years had a buzz around San Antonio, one of the bigger metal bands on the local scene there in San Antonio. So congrats.
Let's dig into the elephant in the room. One of the reasons that I wanted to have you on here is you have created our little I'm being humble here. Our little scene, our molehill, you've made it into a mountain, Juan. You really kind of took what you've become an archivist of sorts, and along with other archivists, you have. I don't think it was like overnight. I think it took you a long while to create something that when did you first come up with it? And this is sort of your title is As Viewed from the Pit is your sort of brand, isn't it? As Viewed from the Pit. Well, hold on, got Twinkies. Gotta do that.
Who's that guy on the cover?
Who's that guy with the nice ass?
I don't know. Sexy blonde guy.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to him?
I don't know, man. He's probably dead. So,
As Viewed from the Pit.
Your collection of just like, I'll go ahead and say it. useless rock and roll memorabilia, relationships with photographers and videographers and fanzine editors and writers and creators and all of the things that you would look, ooh, I love this flyer, and then you put it away, and then 30 years later you pull it on, and you decide to come up with well, as viewed from the pit, I think that is something that you've had going on for a while, whether it be an email address, a website, or something. When did you first come up with As Viewed from the Pit, which sounds like a fanzine, a cool, like, 80s metal fanzine? Tell us a little bit about how you feel about that.
Well, as far as the name, I was, I had tossed around a couple of ideas, and, I went to a couple people that were in the scene, have been in the scene, or still in the scene, that I talked to pretty regularly and was getting opinions. Honestly, everybody hated the name.
Well,
I was the only one. I was adamant, and this is going to be the name. And, everybody was making very valid points. And I was like, nope, that's the name. I'm going to keep it.
But hold on. The name of what?
Of when I started working on the book. When I started
the book. Okay.
Yeah, for the actual book
is what we're talking about.
Right.
Okay, let's pretend. I'm sorry, keep going.
So that's where that came from. The title came when I had the idea to start working on the book. I was dabbling before the book. I was thinking about jumping back into the periodical, entertainment periodical business. I'd run a couple of local and regional magazines, music magazines, entertainment magazines, newspapers.
Okay.
So I was thinking about jumping back in. And kind of weighing things out, kind of getting feelers out. I hadn't done it in quite some time. And then the event at Text Pop happened. So that was the catalyst for the book.
Tell people what that is.
Okay, so Text Pop is a museum of South Texas popular culture. So they showcase local and regional artists, musicians, a little bit of everything. They have different events. So there was an event that had all was dealing with all the early metal stuff from the 80s. And so everybody was getting back together where, everybody's looking at the pictures and, listening to the music and just looking at all the flyers and just all the memorabilia that people had kept over the years that were displayed. Ruby did an amazing job putting that together and having everybody together. People I didn't talk, that I know that we talk, but we didn't get to hang out. Our daily lives as getting to be adults, we all kind of go our different ways.
Dude, I think some people have pictures of them. There's probably some pictures online. I don't know if you have any photos of the event at Text Pop, but there was like a militia wall. There was a Hellstar wall.
Yeah.
There was a San Antonio Slayer wall. There was a Juggernaut wall. There was yes, it was.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was just amazing to see all that and it was cool seeing all that stuff and getting those memories. But having everybody there, and people that I always looked up to, bands that I listened to that were there, people that I know, friends that just went to shows, and having everybody there again. And that's what really, I was like, I want to do a magazine again, but I want something more permanent. I want people who don't know or who weren't there to feel what I felt back when I was going to shows and what I feel right now.
So we're me and Dave held up this really awesome glossy coffee table style book that is called, for those of you who just don't really know what it is, we're actually sort of like worshiping right now. Juan, our guest today, has done this really excellent job that was quite an undertaking of putting together a photo memory book type of a thing called As Viewed from the Pit. Photos from the South Texas metal scene from 1978 to 1989. Now, I learned a lot about Texas music, hard rock and heavy metal music, and there's a lot of stuff in here that I did not know about. So I wanted, and maybe it's just me, I almost wanted there to be even more quotes and verbiage and description of some of the bands that I didn't know about, because I was just like, what? I didn't know. And so was in that band. It was like this web of San Antonio and or putting it all together. But this book has a sleeve in the back that has old flyers and ticket stubs, and I just never take this stuff out. I just leave it in there. It's like, oh man, I can't take that out, right? That's like
it's like taking the Kiss doll out of the box.
Yeah, you can't do that.
You just don't do it. You don't do it.
So this talks about. I mean, obviously, I'm completely honored that you chose to put my butt on the front cover, and there was no like deals made on the golf course or payola or what do I get? You're gonna have to pay me if you want to use my back ass. But the photo really says a lot about what's going on here, not just because there's this silly person wearing spandex on the front, but there are these maniacs. And it's sold out Cameo Theater. There's probably 700 or 800 people in the room for bands that no one else in the world maybe at the time, or the world was just beginning to hear about at this time, or had only heard about it at that moment. The Watchtower record wasn't quite out yet. Slayer Prepare to Die was. Wizard Knights of Metal was out. There were things happening in San Antonio that Watchtower, that was like a coveted thing. And he's like, yeah, we got a demo. And the next thing to move forward with is your EP or your record or your, and that seemed to be, we had guest Rodney Dunsmore, who says a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal stuff that was happening from mid to late 70s in the UK and just the British Isles, England, they didn't put out demos. They put out 7-inches. They would write a handful of songs and they would put out a record. And I never even realized that was like, oh, I guess that's right. You don't really find a cassette of Def Leppard. They put it on wax. Cassettes were like this expensive thing. It was actually cheaper probably to put out a couple songs on. Anyway, so that was sort of a play on things. But if you look at the faces and the eyes of these people, and I'm making the same face back at them. You know what I mean? And so there's something to say about that and the reasons why. So the Tex Pop event with like Cyrus, I got up with like there was a version of S.A. Slayer and Militia, and and I got and that night was pretty incredible. But let's talk about the work you have, really the sweat and blood you put and love and heart that you've put into this book, and what from the time that Tex Pop event happened, where it was like a kind of a who's who. I mean, Jack Orban was there.
Yeah.
That's huge. He's the reason. I mean, my first concert was UFO and Rush, Stone City Attractions, mic drop. Yeah. That's Jack Orban. He brought all those bands. Joe Anthony's playing them. Jack Orban's bringing them to town.
Booking them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you decide, I'm going to make this coffee table book. Did you know what kind of hell you were going to go through?
I didn't know. And it didn't matter at the time. I thought, well, you know what? I know enough people that I can get what I need. And I quickly learned that I was absolutely wrong over the years. And as you move, you get older, stuff disappears, you lose stuff. So I figured it's going to be easy. Everybody's got tons of stuff. And it turned out very quickly, I learned that is absolutely not accurate, that most people don't keep stuff. They don't keep pictures. There was a handful, literally a handful of photographers that actually shot pictures at that time that weren't on a little Instamatic, that had pictures of inequality or that they kept.
Yeah.
So that was tracking down individuals, photographers, to get in those pictures, because a lot of the guys in the bands just didn't have them. They just, over the years, they either went away or they never had them in the first place. So that was the hard part. I planned this. I wanted to do this huge coffee table book with all these photos, and I have no photos.
So the first name that comes to mind is obviously Liliana.
Yeah.
Liliana Martinez was at every hard rock heavy metal show. I think that she was shooting for Full Tilt Boogie, or maybe writing for Full Tilt Boogie, which was like a newspaper leaflet kind of a thing.
Yeah,
that you picked up
weekly newspaper. Yeah.
Yeah, there was mainly an entertainment rag, sort of similar to the Austin Chronicle, but a San Antonio version of something like that. Tell us a little bit about, now, Liliana has been gone from the earth for a while now.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Were you in touch with Bear, her brother? Were you in touch with her family to try to find some of her backlog of photographs?
It was her brother that I reached out to through, several people to introduce me, because that was the other stumbling block that I had, that while I knew some people, I didn't know everybody. There was, as one does, there's particular bands that, I would go and see every time they were playing. And there were others that I would catch every once in a while, but we weren't buddies. We weren't friends. We weren't acquaintances. They were bands that I went to go listen to, and that was where that relationship stopped. So the first obstacle in trying to find photographs was nobody knew who I was. So as far as they were concerned, I was just some guy asking them for a bunch of pictures. So that's, getting introduced to her brother, and it took a little while, and I don't blame him. He didn't know who I was, and I'm asking him for, his sister who's passed away, for her worldly possessions.
Yeah,
and so that took a while to, I spoke with them multiple times, and I had several people that kind of jumped in and spoke for me, which I wouldn't have gotten the photos I got without their help.
Well, that's not your fault. They needed to vet you. They needed to understand what it is you were trying to do. But I'm, as soon as someone goes, hey, this guy, at that point, floodgates should have opened.
And it did. I mean, let's be honest, between you and Mike Solis, those were the biggies. Those were, once y'all spoke, I couldn't have done the book without y'all.
I don't feel
without
like,
a doubt.
I don't, honest, well, thank you for that. But I feel like there's no agenda here. I'm not trying to, I'm not going to be in your book if I don't help. This is about preservation of something that we all belong to.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. What I wanted to do.
Yeah, you're championing our livelihoods and our youth, and the reason that people pay $5,000 for records we put out when we were 17 and 18 years old. It's crazy. So here's the deal. So it was fairly easy for me to call Jeff Tweedy. That's another big one. And for Mike to reach out to Janie Gomez, or both of us to reach out to either Janie Gomez or Jeff Tweedy. Between those three, I feel like you got a lot. But dude, there's so much more than that going on within the pages. And I don't have specific questions to that, but like I was talking about the bands in the late 70s. This was early 80s. Liquid Sky. The history there with how it spawned into the metal thing and the DJs that were playing the homegrown record, the San Antonio 99.5 Kiss homegrown record with all those great musicians on it contributing.
So when you're rummaging through all these archives that people are giving you access to, or that you're managing to find on your own or whatever, which one or two things stands out to you as like, oh my God, like you uncovered a treasure? Was there anything like a photo or a flyer that was just, so monumental you were like, oh, this makes it complete?
There was actually a lot. There was a lot, and thankfully for Rodney Dunsmore, he's got stuff, and that man keeps everything he touches.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that he does.
We know.
Because he had stuff that...
Did you see his episode yet?
I did. I watched it. Of course I watched it. But he had stuff just tucked away that, that is just amazing. He's got like the original San Antonio Slayer, the actual Slayer cutouts that were on Ronnie's amp. He has those.
Oh, wow.
He's got handmade Devastation dolls. Some fan made Devastation dolls of the entire band.
Yeah.
And just stuff like that just no one else would have. They're one-offs. They're one-of-a-kinds that you would never see anywhere else. And so I was very lucky. And again, Rodney was somebody that I had seen at shows, but I didn't know him. He didn't know me. That luckily through common acquaintances that I was able to get a lot of what I got from him. And he was invaluable. But ticket stubs from the Slayer versus Slayer show. That was one of the last additions to the book because I could not find. It took almost 3 years of looking for a stub and no one had one.
Wow.
I finally found one.
A ticket stub.
Who had it? Who had the one?
I got it from an individual who had it for sale for a long time. I found an old post. I went Wayback Machine looking for old websites, and I found somebody who had it for sale. So it took almost 3 months to track down that individual to see if he had any photos. So that's what that took. But I that's what I wanted. I wanted one of those things. So that was such a huge monumental show.
Yeah.
But one that I could find, and I looked everywhere for ticket stubs for that show.
In my eyes, the Via Fontana was like a ground zero.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For a lot of things in San Antonio, I'm sure people probably lost their virginity there, whatever. I mean, it's in the heart of downtown San Antonio, and it's dust now. It's no longer there. So the things that people say, Via Fontana, what the hell is that? Oh, well, if you worship heavy metal, you need to know about the Via Fontana and the legend of,
Yeah.
I think that, go back to the Slayer versus Slayer. Everybody is going to be able to figure that out just by what, the phrase. But for some reason, it's only certain circles that seems to be a big deal. And I feel like it's legendary mainly in this market, in certain circles around here. I feel like people maybe in Europe who love both Slayers, and that once upon a time there was these two bands called Slayer and da-da-da. And then maybe they don't even know the backstory. I mean, San Antonio Slayer had already disbanded, and it was Omni Productions that called Don Van Staveren or whatever and said, hey, why don't you get the band back together so we can do a Slayer on Slayer? And he was not joking. And they did it, and now there's this big hoopla, and here you are looking for a ticket stub for your book just so we can have this window in time. And Juan, thank you so much for creating this window in time. Are there any more of these available just right now?
I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
Number one, how many copies did you produce? And number two, is it available still?
I self-published it. I had reached out, but again, to several publishers, but again, I had no published work before. I did, magazine and newspaper stuff, but no books. And I only reached out to a couple, and I either received no response or, well, we'll see. And it didn't dissuade me because I was going to do it regardless.
Sure.
So I self-published. I only printed 125 copies. The day it was released, I was already sold out. So for the actual release party, by the time I hit that release party, I was already sold out. I had none to spare. Looked at doing a second print. I was approached by a lot of people, especially overseas, guys that y'all know, common acquaintances. But the shipping, because that book is kind of heavy.
It is heavy.
The shipping was just astronomical.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going to work out. I had a lot of people interested, but it was just too expensive to ship it overseas.
Yeah.
So I thought about a second print, and I didn't have enough orders to warrant doing it locally.
Well, at least you're trying to be smart about it. I mean, I know people that are frivolous when it comes to stuff like that, and I think that you were being smart about. You don't want to live with a storage unit full of these books that you just couldn't sell. I mean, I don't think that would ever be the case. But I feel like you're just being smart about it I
had to make sure I covered. I wanted to make sure I covered my costs,
Right.
which I did. I was able to. I had, my stuff set aside that I needed to. I had individuals that I needed to take care of. That had helped me so much with the book, and I covered my costs. Really wanted to do the second run, and it never quite worked out.
Not yet.
Well, okay. So I was holding off on this information until today.
I scratched it.
The second print is going live the day that this episode goes live.
Wow.
So we are doing a second print run.
Okay.
We are adding 8 pages. And I say we because I couldn't have done this without everybody who helped. But we're adding 8 pages. I didn't want to go overboard because since the time the book has come out, now I've gotten inundated with stuff because now everybody's like, oh, well, shit, he was serious. So now I've got a lot of material.
But they thought you were just fucking around the first time, and then when it came out,
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
again, it was.
Look, yeah, that guy that called me, yeah, that's never going to happen. Oh shit.
Yep. So, and that's okay. But I wrestled a lot with what to add and how much to add, and I didn't want to go overboard because I never want to put somebody in a position where like, well, shit, now I have to buy another copy, or I didn't want that at all. I didn't want anybody to think that it was a money grab or anything like that. There was things I wanted to fix in the book. Things have happened since that point, since the book came out, that I feel need to be shown. There was
interesting. So you're seeing things that have transpired that are relevant to the project.
Yes,
like,
and one of them is San Antonio City Hall has been under renovations for several years. When they decided to redo City Hall, they opted to have murals painted on each floor of City Hall. So they ran this huge thing with San Antonio artists to find 5 artists to do a mural on each floor. One of the theme was, locations. So, you had a lot of artists that were submitting, of course, the Missions or, Tower of Americas, it's very specific, iconic locations in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Well, one of the artists he approached it a little bit differently. So what he did was iconic locations, but having to do with music. So the Landing in San Antonio, the jazz and the Black Spot, where there was a lot of soul music done early in the 50s. So he was one of the ones that was chosen. He reached out to me because he knew the history of heavier music and heavy metal in San Antonio, but had no knowledge base at all. So he had talked to a couple people. He was referred to me. So we sat and we talked and we poured over thousands, and not an exaggeration, thousands of photos before he found what he was looking for. Did the artwork. So that's something I want to include in there, because in City Hall on the 4th floor is a triptych of San Antonio music. So there is a piece of Wicked Angel playing in Southwest High School gym, which was a thing. Apparently it wasn't a thing everywhere, but it was a thing in Texas.
Yeah.
Metal bands playing at a gym during school hours. Steve Cooper.
I saw a metal band in like 1979, the year before I moved to Austin. It was a band, they just did a bunch of Black Sabbath covers. They may have had some some originals. I don't remember that. I just remember the songs that I recognize, and they were current Black Sabbath songs off of, Volume 4 all the way to Never Say Die. And that band was called Spectre, and the drummer, Steve Mendez, I'm in bands with him now. Lives in Austin.
That's just amazing.
Crazy.
Well, I know
sort of synchronicity.
You and Mike, in the band, things you've done in the past, y'all played in high school as well. So
yeah.
That was just a thing here. And then another part of the triptych was Steve Cooper from the Slayer versus Slayer show.
Good choice.
And then the last one, which was one I kind of pushed for, because to me it really exemplified what the scene meant to me, and it's the picture that's on the back of the book. It's got 3 different bands on the back of that cover, all on stage together.
Me wearing underwear on my head. He's going to paint a picture of me wearing underwear.
Yeah. So
it's a visor. It's a visor. It's not underwear. It's a visor. Yeah. Someone threw a hat up there, and I put. What I like is the.
No, we believe you. Really.
The hairbrush. Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know what's worse, a visor or underwear.
I'm wearing suspenders, a visor with a hairbrush in my back pocket.
Rock on, dude.
Like dazed and confused, bro. All right. Heavy metal, man. All right.
That says heavy metal to me. So,
woo, yeah.
So that triptych is now hanging in City Hall and will always be in City Hall.
It's amazing.
Wow.
So for a government agency that fought so hard to keep heavy metal out of the city for years, to have this hanging in City Hall, that's a huge, huge deal.
I agree 100%.
Just a recognition that it's part of the history, and it's an important part of the history. So I definitely want to, that's something that's going to be included because it's important.
Can we give props to the person that came up with this idea, and then through you and the artist's vision and everything, who are we, whose name do we need to say right here?
His name is Raul Gonzalez. After this was done, he's actually the San Antonio artist on staff now. So he's actually, every year San Antonio picks a particular artist, and for a year they're the official artists of San Antonio.
Wow.
And he is it now.
Wow.
So he's an amazing artist.
What about, let's go higher up into like the powers that be that allowed this or had to vote on this idea of these 5 different floors of City Hall having these.
Which city councilman do we need to vote for?
Yes, who is who are we voting for next year? Yeah,
if it was actually the arts department that kind of pushed for it. Yeah. The individual that I dealt with Raul, her name is Crystal. I only spoke with her a handful of times, but she again had no foreknowledge of the heavy, or actually any of them. She wasn't familiar with the jazz stuff that is portrayed in another triptych or the conjunto stuff. Yeah. But she understood that that was something that San Antonio was known for, was music. So that's why she backed them
Music is the cultural blood of San Antonio, and
Yeah.
all kinds of music. San Antonio is a party.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
And
party.
and there's always good music in the background.
That's right.
There's always music.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say, Juan, is that, number one, San Antonio, the history and the culture of San Antonio is rich in music, regardless of genre. And we all know, as metal fans and rock and roll fans, that hard rock and heavy metal is an integral part of that makeup of music. But a lot of times that music gets marginalized or diminished or whatever. But I think it speaks well of the city of San Antonio and of yourself. There's people out there that recognize that, you know what, this might not be my favorite topic. This might not be the kind of music I listen to at my house, but to ignore it is just criminal because it is part of the fabric of San Antonio. And then you alluded to earlier Europe. There might be a market for your book in Europe. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is, because the metal scene in Texas and San Antonio still carries a lot of mystique in European circles, like Watchtower and Militia and Juggernaut and S.A. Slayer. They have fans in Germany and Europe and stuff. So to ignore it is ignorant. And so I applaud the people that do accept it and embrace it and choose to portray it and promote it, because I know it's not everybody's flavor, but it put San Antonio on the map in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's relive exactly what Dave just said by this. And I know this firsthand because I met some of them, I housed some of them, and so did people in San Antonio. People came from all over Europe and Greece to Texas, and they went to all of the major cities that had bands that they had demos or even records from, just so they could stand in the same light as those bands that they came to love. And these were not rock stars. These were underground headbangers that wrote songs when they were in the garage, in their mom's garage, when they were in high school. People from Europe and abroad have made pilgrimages, is that a word? Yeah. To stand in the same light as these kids that just wrote some big dumb heavy metal songs, but it changed, it shined a light globally. People have come to Texas, they've traveled to Houston to stand in the light of Hellstar, to Austin for Watchtower and Militia, to San Antonio for Slayer and Wizard and Juggernaut and beyond. That is huge. This book is part of it. The things that you have done and archived and championed and made phone call after phone call and stayed up all night putting things together and setting this up and making calls to the city hall and meeting artists and meeting photographers and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Even though you only pressed 125, this is huge to people globally, not just to knuckleheads who have a podcast. And I'm just going to say it now before Dave's parting words, but I'll just say it right now while I'm still kind of chatterboxing here. Thank you for doing that. And from the bottom of my heart, there were a lot of people putting out these sort of collections, their coffee table books. A big one is the Bay Area scene with Murder in the Front Row.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that because it's that scene there is a worldwide phenomenon for obvious reasons. And this came out, I went and saw the movie Murder in the Front Row, and Kirk Hammett, I'm getting choked up just talking about it. Kirk Hammett's crying in the movie while he says the same, almost verbatim, that I'm saying on the back, my quote on the back of the book. And I can't say it because I'm about to cry. So, thank you.
Absolutely. And it was my pleasure. And it's something that I wanted to do. I wanted to share what little I could to have somebody relive what to be able to be there where I was and to experience it and to see it through my eyes, and people who were there to help them relive it, people who weren't there so they could at least get a glimpse of it. because it was a beautiful, wonderful thing. And I wanted to share that as much as I possibly could.
Well, it gave a bunch of punks something to do, that's for sure.
Well, I want to say too that speaking for myself, obviously I'm not a musician. I'll never make my mark by putting out a record or playing a great concert or anything. But I've always admired people that are still so passionate about the scene that they never maybe took that passion and turned it into a band situation or a musician situation, but they felt so that there was still this need to contribute in some way or some form. And, you know, I got into the journalism field because I knew I was never going to be the guy on stage. So, but I wanted to have a hand in the scene. So I was going to write about bands. You are a musician. But you also felt so passionate about this scene that you put your money and blood and sweat and tears and time into this book it's amazing. The quality of it is fantastic. And I love the fact that you're considering, or you are putting out a second edition.
Yeah.
And going back to something Jason just said, you know, there's metal scenes all over the world. Some of them get more recognized than others. Obviously, the Bay Area scene out in California, the European scene, the New York scene. But I think there's something special about the Texas metal scene that it's almost like the underdog scene. Like, because none of those bands quite made it to, you know, the Testament level, the Slayer level, the Metallica level, or whatever, that the fans that love that kind of music gravitate towards it. And you've managed to capture that scene in this book. And I think it's like a real prize and treasure for anybody that loves metal, that wants an introductory to the Texas metal scene, because I think you did a great job of capturing it.
Thank you.
And you did a quality job. That's really important too, because, you know, somebody could have put out a fanzine that would have maybe captured the essence of what we're talking about, but you put out something that's enduring and lasting and high quality, and I congratulate you on that, because anybody that has a passion for metal and takes it to the next step and produces something that's lasting, you made your mark, man. So thank you for doing it.
And, you know, speaking of next steps, I have been working with an amazing filmmaker, Lynette Alleman.
Oh, cool.
Who in her own right is just a fantastic producer, director, writer, filmmaker. And we had talked a lot about possibly doing a documentary. And so, and I begged Marlon.
A movie version of the book, maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
So, back to it with begging and borrowing any videos that I can find from anywhere. I've got some footage, some amazing footage that I don't know if a whole lot of people even realize that it's out there.
Wow.
That's putting together, doing that, working to try to start scheduling now that COVID has slowed down a bit. And, all of us are a little bit older, so it affects us a whole lot differently than others.
Yeah.
Getting together with people and starting to do those interviews so we can start working on that as well. But that's going to be a companion documentary.
That is big news.
You
Really
put down one chore and picked up another.
Absolutely.
Well, with the new pressing and the 8 new pages, you're going to have a movie version of it. That sounds like more hell on the horizon.
It's I don't think it's going to be as difficult. Again, Lynette it's just my idea. Lynette is an amazing filmmaker, so I have full confidence that she will take my very narrow vision of what I want and just do wonders with it. And
you've got a few more weapons now than you did.
Yeah, and I want, the book helped me express what I wanted to express and what I want people to see and live through. Now I have the opportunity to do that in spoken word, and it's real important that I'm able to do that and to have other people hear the stories from the horse's mouth, as it were. And So that is the next goal, is getting that taken care of as quickly as we can, and to get that out so everybody can see it. So, you can pop onto YouTube or Amazon, Netflix, whatever, wherever it ends up. I don't care. As long as people get to see it, and experience it, and that's my goal.
Well, making sure that it's available on any platform will be a goal that you can work towards once you wrap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Juan, for everything you've done. I think that you archiving and putting out this book, As Viewed from the Pit, is the book we talk about that's coming out, a second edition, bigger and better, along with a companion as well. I feel like we, the bands, as well as people in the audience and the promoters, and anyone who was there, that is a reason why this needs to be talked about. I feel like in Austin, something like this has not really happened yet. The documentary about the back room, I think, is a great start.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of about the bands as much as it is about the venue. And I think that projects like that are really cool because there's a lot of people that are transplants to Texas who are into what we're into. They don't really know the history. And you're really kind of helping us tell the story and pass it on. So it's appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm always a champion of the guys behind the scene because I'm one of them. I'm not Jason. I don't get on. I'm not Jason. I don't get on stage. I don't make records. I wish I could, but I can't, or I don't, or whatever. So I've always been. I always have respect for people that are passionate about music in the same way I am, and then sort of don't just stop there, but take it to another level. In your case, you put out a book. In my case, I try to interview bands and chronicle it in publications or whatever. We've had our friend Sean Weingartner, our friend Rodney Dunsmore, people like these. These are guys that are behind the scenes, but I think they help make the engine run, and you're one of those dudes. So thank you for all your hard work. I can't imagine all the time and effort that went into putting out that book. So best of luck with the second round. Best of luck with the second round and with the movie that you're working on. And congratulations on the City Hall thing. That's huge.
Yeah, that is huge.
Absolutely.
That meant a lot.
So the movie is the same As Viewed from the Pit. The movie
will have the same title. Yes.
Same title.
Nice.
Just want to make sure. Is there a website that you have that people can contact you or submit materials for said movie or the new edition for the book?
Yes, it'll just be asviewedfromthepit.net. That's the website address. Okay. And they can go there and they can comment. They can reply back. As again, as of the airing of this episode, it will be live and up to do the pre-sales for the second print. And, as we move forward with the documentary, it'll be updated on there as well.
We'll save some copies for me and Dave. You've already made two sales today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I need the companion piece to go with this one.
Yeah.
And I'll need that one signed as well. Juan was kind enough to autograph my copy that I have here. So
before Dave takes us out, Juan, one more time, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Been a pleasure. I am Metal Dave Glessner on behalf of my co-host Jason McMaster and our very special guest today, San Antonio metal archivist, metal fan, metal passionate, metal heart, Juan Herrera. Thank you for joining us, man. It's been a pleasure.
You guys.
Nice catching up with you. And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast.